On today's episode, we talk about our favorite trips to a galaxy far, far away. What is up, guys? Welcome to What We Watch. I am Matt. Happy May the 4th. Happy Star Wars Day. I'm personally more of a Revenge of the Fifth guy, but it is what it is. So May is actually a pretty big Star Wars month, one because of May the 4th Be With You Day, and also because later this month, Solo, a Star Wars story comes out, so we'll be reviewing that. But I thought before we did that, why don't we dive in, and I've never done a countdown of my favorite Star Wars stories. So these are going to be including all the episodic ones, plus some of the newer ones that they're doing. It will not include the Star Wars Christmas special because that would be a dead giveaway at number 1. But we're going to be going through these, and I've never shared these, I don't think, online. And my list is in a different order than a lot of people's lists, so please forgive me, and please listen to my understanding of why I ranked them the way they did. So let's just jump right into it. At number 9, we have Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now this one is universally across the board not very liked. When my wife actually watched it, she compared it to Space Jam because the CGI was just so bad. It looked like all these characters were talking to actual cartoons. There's one saving grace about it, and that is Darth Maul. He is incredible, and I feel like he was wasted. So that almost hurts the movie more than helps the movie because we see so little of him, and he's only involved in a few really amazing scenes. Those are one of the few good scenes in the movie, and so the fact that he was underused almost hurts it more than it helps that he was in the movie. This was weird because this was one of the first Star Wars movies that I remember going to. I was too young to remember the original trilogy, like as far as coming out in movie theaters, and so this was one of the first ones that I saw in movie theaters. And it's just weird because it's talking about diplomacy and all these sort of things, and we want action in our Star Wars stories. And to see like a young Anakin before he was bad guy Darth Vader was a little bit boring, and it just kind of seemed to drag. And I think with all the hype that it received, it just made it that much worse. At number 8, we have Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, this and Phantom Menace, I could actually probably flip-flop depending on my day, just because Attack of the Clones was not much better. The one thing that did save it is there was a lot more action in it, so there were several different battle scenes, and it wasn't just all diplomacy talk, but the script wasn't too good, and we were kind of hoping that maybe Episode 1 was just sort of like a strike one, and maybe they'd figure it out by Episode 2, but it was still a little bit dragging, but we start to at least see the seeds of Anakin going to the dark side and what that might eventually become. And so that kind of puts it a little bit over Episode 1, but not by much. At number 7, we have Rogue One. Now, this was a really enjoyable movie. I actually have probably watched it quite a few times. I enjoy the film, but part of the problem is I enjoy the one scene in the film. If you've seen it, the Darth Vader scene near the end, that was just so cool. I could just watch that on a loop time after time after time again. So that was just really cool to see Darth Vader almost in his prime. But besides that, the movie was good, but part of it was we knew how it was going to turn out. My biggest struggle with this movie is that it was not super memorable. As you can see, I collect a lot of pops, and I have a ton of pops from Rogue One. But if you ask me, besides Jyn, like, I can't really remember a lot of the characters' names. There was a cool crew that was put together. There was a lot of interesting storylines, and the action was exciting. But at the end of the day, I knew that all of these characters probably weren't going to matter in the long run, so it made it really hard for me to make a connection to these characters. And so that's what hurts this film more than anything. Not the fact that it was boring or that there wasn't a lot going on, but I just knew how it was going to end, and I knew that these characters weren't going to be a big deal in the long run, so it made it really hard to connect with them. And to this day, I have trouble even being able to name the characters in the movie. So that was a definite mark against it. At number 6, we have The Last Jedi. This is the newest one, and while it had a lot of very good parts, there was a lot of backlash against this movie. There was just a lot in this movie that just logically did not make sense, from them trying to escape on the ship to why characters were doing what they were doing, and the fact that it just felt a lot like when we reviewed the new Avengers movie, that there were several different movies going on and they kind of just meshed them all together. and it wasn't one coherent story. But unlike Avengers, they had not built up these characters to the point where we individually wanted to see them on their own adventures. It kind of felt like one of those TV movies where there's a couple of different adventures going on, and then you get when you were a kid, you got the VHS that had all these separate adventures and kind of put them into one hour special. That's kind of what this movie felt like. And just some choices that they made as far as what these characters would do felt a little bit off pace with the rest of the Star Wars story. But it was still a really good film, had some good villains, had some good heroes, and so it was not a bad film. Might move up my rankings the more and more that I watch it, and once we see what happens with the next episode, with episode 9, to see if that kind of brings some stuff together. But this, as a standalone one, left me a little bit wanting more. At number 5, we have probably my most controversial pick. Please forgive me. Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Now, hear me out. It's a great film. It's fantastic, but it can kind of be chewed down into a few basic parts. You have the whole thing that happens with Jabba the Hutt. You have the big, long conversation where it's a really good conversation, but where Luke is with Darth and the Emperor, and you're trying to, find that tension of, is Darth going to turn back to the light side, or is Luke going to turn to the dark side? And then you have the whole space battle, and you have Ewoks and the Endor, the moon of Endor, and all these sort of things that are going on. But it kind of breaks down into, there's just not a lot going on. It's a really good conclusion. It's a really good wrap up to the other 2 films that we saw, but standalone, it has a really cool fight between Vader and Luke. That is kind of like the apex, the conclusion of it all. But the stuff on Endor really wasn't that great. Ewoks are fine. I love Ewoks. My wife has an Ewok t-shirt and thinks they're the cutest thing ever. But it kind of felt that was way too intentional. Like, this is aimed at kids and all that, which is fine. But it just didn't really float my boat too much. For this big conclusion, we're fighting another Death Star, and this is what it's all led up to. And it just kind of felt like a 2-act play that was expecting more of. So, still a great film, but I would probably put it at number 5. Please don't hate me. At number 4, we have The Force Awakens. Now, a lot of people kind of compare this to an updated New Hope, and I'm totally fine with that. I think that especially after how poorly the prequels were received, that you had to kind of play it safe, which J.J. Abrams did a fantastic job of doing. Once again, it has its flaws, Rey being able just to pick up stuff, especially knowing what we know now about Rey, but just the fact that she was able to just like jump in there and be as good as people who had been training their whole lives to do this sort of stuff was kind of a letdown. But it was great to go back to a galaxy far, far away, and it was great to see these characters after, not their prequel self, but after the events of episodes 4, 5, and 6, and kind of see where they were at now. There's a little bit of confusion, and one of the things I don't like about what they do now with movies is, like, they didn't really explain what the First Order was. They didn't really explain why Kylo Ren was such a big deal, or like, hey, I thought the Empire had already fallen, what's the deal here? And you had to read like the comics that came out before, and I don't think that should be necessarily a requirement, all that reading and all that sort of stuff. But I just really wasn't super thrilled with it. With that side of it, the fact that you had to kind of do some reading and some knowledge beforehand, before even going into the movie. You should just be able to sit down and enjoy the movie, and enjoy the movie more if you've done that sort of stuff. But it was great to see all of these heroes gather together and to start a brand new story. And even though they did play it a little safe, it was still incredibly enjoyable. And I loved it, and I felt like it fit right in to with what the other Star Wars movies were trying to accomplish. At number 3, we have Star Wars, or A New Hope, the one that started it all. So if I'm going to say that The Force Awakens is kind of a copy of A New Hope, then the original typically is better than the remake. So this one was so good. I don't have it at the very top of my list just because it was very base level, and I think a lot of that was because he had the story in mind for what he would like to do, that George Lucas would like to continue. But I'm pretty sure most people know this by this point, but Star Wars was not a guaranteed success. A lot of people thought it was going to be terrible. I think that, was it Mark Hamill? He said that he heard that the preview for Star Wars was going to be in a movie theater. And so he was sitting in the theater and he was so excited, and they showed the preview before the movie in the movie theater. And it said, coming to a galaxy near you this summer or whatever. And some guy in the audience yelled, yeah, and then out of it 2 weeks later. Like, people thought it was going to be terrible. People thought it was going to be cheesy. And people just fell in love with it. Part of the reason it's so high on my list is because it's the one that started it all. It's just a cultural phenomenon. It's required viewing for any movie lover. And while there are flaws and while there are things that, once you put it in the big scheme of things, don't really line up all of the way, like why they would say this or why a character would do that, I kind of give them a pass because they didn't realize, the gold that they had in their hands at the moment. But it's a fun adventure. It's a space adventure. And for a movie that wasn't supposed to succeed, it just captured the hearts of audiences and, started this phenomenon that is now a multi-billion-dollar organization and is going to be making movies probably for the rest of time. So it has to get credit for that. At number 2, we have Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which, once again, let me explain. Most of the time, all the prequels are all balled together into this garbage heap. And like I said, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones are the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion. And I feel like a lot of times Revenge of the Sith kind of just gets put in there and people don't give it a fair shot because it's a prequel movie. And it does have flaws. There are some weak parts. But to be able to see why the reasoning behind Darth Vader is incredibly important. Especially because me being a huge villain fan, me being somebody who loves villains, sometimes I like my bad guys just to be bad guys. And we hear that argument all of the time, that we don't want to hear the backstory of Darth Vader. Like, we want him just to be Darth Vader, this big imposing force. But the problem with that is that in Empire and in Return of the Jedi, we want him to be redemptive. We want him to have a reasoning to come back to the light. So if we can't have him just be a bad guy, this big diabolical force like he was in A New Hope, and then want him to be redemptive in episodes 5 and 6, if we don't give him redemptive qualities and see how he fell to the dark side in episode 3. It also has the best lightsaber fight by far between Obi-Wan and Anakin. 1, just because of the special effects and the choreography, but then 2, just in the meaning of it. Just the fact that the whole idea of you were my brother and that you had this mentor-mentee, father-son, brother relationship that is being torn apart and they have to fight each other. And you see exactly how far Anakin has fallen. And so it's just a really great movie if you just kind of separate it from the baggage that comes with it being a prequel. Hayden Christensen wasn't maybe the best choice, but he does do a pretty good job here. And just to see all of these characters and how we got to Star Wars from the prequels, I think it does a great job of building a bridge. We also have General Grievous, who I love and I think is highly underrated. And it's just kicks off with an awesome space battle and ends with us going into what is known as one of the great film franchises of all time, kicking us off into A New Hope. But I think it gets a bad rep because it's a prequel and strictly because episode 1 and episode 2 are pulling it down. But as a standalone film, I think that it's really, really powerful and probably one of the better Star Wars films that's out there. And my number 1 movie, this one's a little bit more predictable, a little bit more in line, is The Empire Strikes Back. Quite possibly one of the best movies of all time. 1, because the phenomenon that was Star Wars was in full swing, and the fact that they took it to the next level has one of the biggest twist reveals in cinema history, in storytelling history. I don't think almost anybody saw that coming, and so it was just incredible to see that, especially like as a young kid, that the bad guy was the good guy's dad. Like, that was just, like, it was insane. It had awesome space battles. It had awesome fights. It had great acting, good character development. And then one of the things that I liked it a lot more was than Return of the Jedi was the fact that we saw so much more of this world. We get to see Hoth. We get to see all of these different characters and all these different situations. We get to see meet Lando and go up into Cloud City, and just all of these different things. We get to see Vader some more. We get to hear more about the Empire as a whole, and just to see all of these different characters and see all this different development that we get from characters that we've already fell in love with in A New Hope, but just taken to the next level. A sequel that is probably, and in my opinion, is better than the original, is very hard to find, because they not only continue the stories of the people that we love and we care about, but they take it to a next level, add more characters that we love, and want us wanting more at the end, and excited for Return of the Jedi. So this film basically, I don't want to say it's flawless, but it is almost as good as a film can get. And the fact that it's a sequel and also a middle child. So knowing that there's more to come, and knowing that they have to at least live up to the first film, is a tough task, and they knock it out of the park. So that is why, in my opinion, Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film that has ever been made. Well, there are my rankings. Thank you so much for sitting through and watching this with me. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. Also, make sure that you check out Stardust. I've talked about this app a few times, but it's a cool mesh of both like a Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube blend where you can talk about your favorite TV shows and movies. I'm actually going to try to do a more quickie review on all of these individual movies leading up to Solo, A Star Wars Story. So be sure to jump on, follow me, username Waz, and enter yourself in to win a $10 Fandango gift card. So I look forward to talking to you guys on that app or in the comments down below. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram. I'm going to be trying something new. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of Pops. I have a lot of them, and a lot of them are Star Wars ones. So over the next couple of days, on our off days when we're not posting episodes, I'm going to be posting pictures of my favorite Pops. And so if you guys are a Funko Pop collector, or you just like that, be sure to check us out and follow us on Instagram. Give us a like, and maybe share some of your own as well. Well, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for joining with us. We are officially 3 weeks in. This is so much fun. Thank you guys so much for participating, and we will see you guys on Monday.